Hello there. I had beans on toast for breakfast this morning.
Nice.
Really yummy. Bit of cheese and grinded black peppercorns. And I was so excited.
Wow. You know, Barry almost had the same thing. Barry, what did you have?
Beans, coffee, and biscuit, and a little piece of fatback.
Oh, see, Barry had the little piece of fatback.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Let's do this. Mike Russell. Yes! Oh, man, this is going to be ridiculous. I can't believe it. You're listening to the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for the likes of E+ and AAPD and Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop. We really get deep into the audio engineering aspects of podcast production. We don't really get into any other aspect of podcasting. We don't get into the listeners or downloads or marketing or anything. Just audio quality and production time as well. So actually, if you implement the best of what you learn on this show, from what our great guests and I have to say, your podcast will sound a lot better and you'll spend less time producing them. And of course, Barry is with me. Barry? Where'd he go? Barry, are you there? Oh, he's right here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's right. That's what Mike Russell likes. So Barry's with me.
I love Barry.
Barry is the maintenance guy in my old building, and he joins me on this show. It's not Barry White. Barry, is your last name White?
No way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not. Can you believe people, Barry, can you believe people sometimes think that you are Barry White?
That's a mystery.
I know, because you're not. All right, well, Mike Russell is here. That's right. You've been listening to this show for 72 previous sessions, and now Mike Russell is here, and I have to get my my friends to help me welcome Mike Russell!
Hey. Wow.
Oh, man. I know how to silence the crowd,
Hey, Chris.
too. Ready? All right. Stop. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. No reverb?
Mike Russell is the founder and creative director at Music Radio Creative. That's right, musicradiocreative.com. Anyone who needs podcast intros or radio jingles or commercials or anything like that, that's what Mike does. Mike is the master. I've been in podcasting for more than 5 years now, and I've always heard your name, Mike. And it's we were talking before the show. It's amazing that you and I haven't connected yet.
I know, it's crazy. And I've been listening to the Podcast Engineering Show now. I'm a big Barry fan, and I like some of the other stuff you've done, and I've kind of been checking out everything Chris Curran. I like your energy as well. I'm just like, wow, why have we not met?
Right? So you've been doing the Music Radio Creative podcast. You started it audio only back in 2012. And these days what you're doing is you're actually streaming live video every day onto multiple platforms, including YouTube and Periscope and others. But you're also you're taking that audio from the live video stream and you're also putting that out as an audio podcast, right?
Exactly, yes, which provides an extra challenge in my workflow because as opposed to what I was doing before, just hitting record and then editing in Adobe Audition, now I'm having to take MOV files or MP4 files, strip out audio and mix it down and do all of my process and then upload it eventually to my podcast host. So yeah, it's proving to be fun.
That's awesome. So we're going to do the speed round. We're going to find out what mic you're using and your setup, your equipment setup there and your workflow. I just want to quickly mention that you do have a YouTube channel, which is where that's like your main home for the videos, right? Is your YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's under the name Mike Russell and the URL is youtube.com/musicradiocreative. These links will be in the show notes. So go ahead and look at the show notes and click through. I did want to ask you real quick though, when you're doing your show on video, and then you're stripping the audio and putting out an audio-only podcast. Do you ever run into problems where, because I know when you do video, sometimes you show something, like you might even hold something up and say, look at this. Can you see this? Do you like the color of this and the shape? And when that translates to audio only, sometimes people can not know what you're talking about. Do you run into that issue?
Yes, and it's a great question, Chris, because I'm very aware of that all the time I'm doing the show, that I'm not just doing it for the, however many people turn up for the live stream. I'm doing it for people who are watching it maybe on the video replay. And particularly, I'm still trying to keep my audio podcast hat on and think, if I'm explaining something really complicated with a plugin, how is that going to come across or translate when someone listens in audio only? So I do my best to remain conscious of that. I'm sure there are times when the audio podcast listeners get really frustrated, but then I think also they're busy people, the folks listening to the audio podcast, so they're probably listening on 2x or 3x, and I'm just grateful that they give me their time, even if they can't make it to a live video stream, to actually listen in. So hopefully it's proving to be of value, and it's another way to, I guess, repurpose from the video into a podcast. I wish I had time or someone who could help me turn them all into blog posts as well. But yeah,
right.
Certainly very handy. Yeah. Do have to remain conscious of that though. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's get into the speed round. We want to know what mic you're using and where you have it plugged in, your audio interface, how you're getting it into the computer, what software you're recording it on. So just take us through the entire process, quick, within 60 seconds maybe, and then we'll spend a lot of time unpacking it and talking about it.
Okay, quick. It's my voice box going into a TLM 103, Neumann TLM 103, down a mic boom arm via an XLR cable into the back of a DBX 286S, out via a TLR cable into my mixing desk, which is a Soundcraft Signiture 12 MTK. That goes in via a line-in on channel 3. On the DBX, I do a little bit of compression. On the mixing desk, and a tiny bit of EQ. On the mixing desk, a tiny bit more EQ. And then that mixing desk goes via USB into the back of my iMac 27-inch 5K late 2015, and eventually it records into Adobe Audition.
Adobe Audition. All right. Sorry, I take notes. Does everyone listening to this realize that I take notes while I'm doing the show? And sometimes people are like, well, why don't you just listen later and take notes later? And it's like, well, no, I need to ask follow-up questions right now. Right? I need to know what you said now so I can ask follow-up questions. So anyway, Adobe Audition, I've only used that a little bit, but it's such a popular program, and people love it because it's a multi-track DAW. So obviously you can mix multi-track and do everything with effects and everything. But also, apparently there's a part of Audition where you can just open up a stereo file, right? And do some editing and some loudness matching and things like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. So as well as working in the multi-track, there's something known as the waveform view, which I guess is kind of like Audacity, although Audacity is it's a cross, isn't it? It has lots of different tracks, although I don't use Audacity much. The waveform view essentially is a destructive view where you can make changes to the waveform and it happens and that's done and you save it and it's overwritten. And the multi-track you can as you know, Chris, if you've used Audition before, you can do non-destructive edits that kind of remain there on different tracks and then finally mix the whole thing down. But yeah, you mentioned loudness. That is one of the coolest things, in my opinion, about Adobe Audition is the fact that you can really, they've got some really cool tools for applying the loudness standard you want to meet. And it's pretty easy to use as well, which is what I like.
Yeah, that's awesome because I use Reaper as my DAW. And so in Reaper,
oh, wow.
I don't like doing any detailed editing in there because you can zoom in on the wave and stuff, but it's just not, I don't know, it's something about it. It's not meant to be like a detailed, waveform editor per se. I use SoundForge Pro to do my really detailed editing. So I usually mix stuff down out of Reaper and then I'll open the wave file in SoundForge Pro. And I just love SoundForge Pro. I've been using it for probably almost 20 years. Probably late 90s I started using, one of the, original versions probably. And I just love it because you can zoom in on the wave. It's very detail oriented. And I can just zoom around in there real fast. I can just edit like so quick. So, but that's great that you could do both in Audition. Is that how you do your fine detailed editing within the waveform view in Audition?
So occasionally I will skip back to the waveform view, but I also find in the multitrack you can really zoom in on the multitrack and look at a wave in detail and kind of make cuts and edits and changes that need to be made, particularly when it's editing a podcast, for instance, cutting out breaths or clicks or any ums, if you want to get rid of those as well. I might go to the waveform view to use something that I quite enjoy using called spectral frequency display, which I'm guessing maybe Reaper or SoundForge have an equivalent where you can actually see all of the different frequencies in a kind of... It's kind of like one of those displays they use on those ghost hunting shows where they're like, oh, look, there's a sound there or a frequency there. And right. You can kind of see, there's like a click or something you want to like patch out. You can do stuff like that. I don't know. Is there something equivalent in Reaper or SoundForge to that?
No, there's not, but I actually use RX6. So that obviously has
really cool,
really awesome spectral displays and all that. So that's cool that you can do that right in the waveform view of Audition.
And it's brilliant, because the spectral frequency display comes with a few tools like marquee selection, lasso selection, paintbrush, and one of my favorites is spot healing. And what that does is if there's a little noise that you don't want, I particularly have started using this on clicks, and it's amazing. There can be a little, when a voiceover says something and they're like, the best music, and they've obviously had their dinner before they did the voice,
right?
And you're like, I need to get all those clicks out, and then you can go into the kind of high frequency area, and you can see it goes from purple, I think, through orange to red to yellow, and obviously yellow being this frequency is really loud, and you can usually just see a little yellow circle where those clicks are. And if you use the spot healing tool, it kind of, rather than completely deleting the frequency, it just kind of like, I don't know how it does it, it's kind of magic, it just kind of smooths it or reduces it, and you kind of get that, to explain in photo editing terms, that Photoshop effect where you've kind of, spot healed a certain area. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's like removing a blemish on someone's, on a photo. That's exactly what it is. And it's really amazing how you can, like you said, when you're just editing audio, like for instance, in SoundForge Pro, which is just a stereo editor, I could see a click and I can actually highlight the click and delete it. That's one thing. But with the spectral displays, with what you're describing, and with the spot healing tool, and also in RX6 you can do this, you can just highlight the noise itself, not across all frequencies. Like if it's like you said, if it's a high frequency click, you can just kind of circle it in the high frequency range, and it doesn't touch the lower frequencies or anything else at all. It's so cool.
Wow.
I love
really
that.
Good. And I'm curious, Chris, what you like about Reaper, because I've heard that name so many times and I've never ever used that DAW, but so many audio producers that we work with at Music Radio Creative say, you've got to use Reaper, you've got to use it. So I'm curious, what's good about it?
Well, okay, so when I got into podcasting and I had to get, a multi-track DAW for my computer, I started looking around for, of course, the first one I looked at is Pro Tools, because that's the one I was familiar with from my music days back in the day. But the thing is, I had a PC, and I was looking for PC software to run for my DAW. And I was looking around, and there was a review of Reaper. And first of all, it doesn't cost anything, although you can contribute a little bit if you want. But you can literally use it forever and just never pay a dime. And then this guy on YouTube was showing how the graphics in Reaper, like the waveforms, load almost instantaneously. And I don't know, maybe now other DAWs do this too.
Wow.
But apparently, apparently when you zoom in on stuff, some DAWs will actually have to take time to draw the wave and to draw the display.
Yeah.
And he's like, Reaper, look, man, you can zoom in and out. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, look, that's not, in a way, that's, well, that is helpful for the display to be rendered quickly. But that's definitely, I don't think it's like a deal breaker. But I don't know. I like that, and then I got it, and I tried it, and it's just solid. Like, it's just a solid DAW. Look, it's definitely not as good as Adobe Audition or Pro Tools, or maybe even Logic Pro. I don't know, or some of these others. It's definitely not that good, but it has all the functionality pretty much, and it's just solid. Like, it just works. And so the way I use it is I just use Reaper for my DAW, but then I have third-party plugins, which I select. Cool. I buy my plugins very selectively. So, and look, and you know, Mike, that it's the processing, the sound processing itself that's gonna make it sound good or bad. It's the DAW itself is just like a container, right?
Exactly. Although when I worked in radio, there were Pro Tools snobs who were like, if it's not produced on Pro Tools, it's not proper audio.
Oh, man. Barry, have you ever met a Pro Tools snob?
Oh, man. Wow.
Try to slip in my new Barry clips. Oh, wait, Barry, what about the Pro Tools snobs?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Forget it. Awful.
Awful. I love he ends that one. Awful.
Yeah. Awful.
So you don't agree with Pro Tool snobs, Barry?
Senseless.
All right. So yeah. So anyway, that's why I use Reaper, and it's good. And I'm now planning to buy my next production machine, and after the last session with Corey Coates, I'm really thinking about getting a Mac, like a really powerful Mac, and trying to do everything in the box. Anyway, we talked about a little bit that last session, but I don't know. I'm not a Mac guy, and I'm. It's not that I'm afraid to buy, a big Mac, as you might call it. But it's. I guess I could use Reaper on a Mac as well, so I guess I could just keep using all my plugins and right.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm pretty sure you can get Reaper on the Mac. And I mean, if like you say, Chris, if you base it around the plugins you're using, really you can port yourself to any DAW as long as you can learn the shortcuts and how it all works. That's the hardest thing I find when I'm checking out a new DAW, and I'm kind of like, it's not quite like Adobe Audition, and how do I do this? And then I spend 15 minutes reading the manual trying to figure out how to make a cut, and I'm like, I'll just go back to Adobe Audition and hit Control K.
Right. Yeah, apparently when it comes to music, there is, like, for instance, Pro Tools, when you mix down a song or let's say an episode of a podcast show, when you do your final mix down, when you render it, apparently there's something they call an audio engine inside the DAW, and the audio engine actually, and there's probably another word for it. I don't, maybe that's not even the 100% correct term for it, but it's something that actually mixes all the audio together, and as it renders it glues it all together into either a mono or stereo mix. Apparently in Pro Tools, the audio engine is definitely much better than a lot of other DAWs. But for podcasting, I really don't know. Well, first of all, you probably don't even need that for podcasting, but if you're mixing a hit record, I can understand where you probably would want the best. But for podcasting, I think everything else is just fine. Right, Mike?
That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's good. I'd never thought about it that way, but yeah, now you mention it, there must be some clever algorithm inside the software that does all that, and maybe, some are a little better than others. But yeah, like you say, if you're just mixing, voices together, maybe a bit of music at the start and end, then it's not particularly as important as, mixing a hit record or, stuff with loads of stuff going on. So yeah, interesting.
Hey, quick question, because I want to step through all your equipment stuff, but when you stream live video, obviously you're streaming the audio as well, and you're recording, if you're streaming through YouTube, at the end you just hit stop and save, and YouTube will save that, and it's already up on your YouTube. That's how it works, right?
That's right, yeah. It's brilliant. So live streaming on both YouTube Live and Facebook Live, it means when I hit stop, there is a published archive of that video forever, although pretty much every platform I stream to reduces the quality of audio I send. I think it's about 128 kilobits per second, and YouTube is stereo. For some strange reason, Facebook Live still currently is only live streaming in mono. So when I'm doing production effects, hey, listen to this on the left, listen to this on the right.
Oh.
People on Facebook are saying, what?
Oh, man. That's
I know,
not
right? So they've got to sort that out.
That's crazy. So do you ever do a live stream or record videos and then process the sound separately and then remarry it to the video and then like reprocess the video and then upload it?
Well, I do. So I use OBS Studio to do the live stream, and there's a feature in there where you can also, as well as live streaming, you can keep a local copy of what you're doing. Unfortunately, they don't have the option for audio only, which I would absolutely love if that was the case, because if I could do a WAV file or even a high-quality MP3, that would be perfect. Drop it in Audition, top and tail, and it's ready. But as it stands at the moment, it generates an MOV or an MP4 file, which I then pull into Audition, strip the audio, which strips the audio, and then I can essentially do the same thing. But I'm curious, and I don't know if you're aware of this, Chris, whether stripping the audio from a video, even if it's locally recorded, are you somehow losing a bit of audio quality? I'm guessing you probably are somewhere there.
Well, like you do, you bring your video file into Audition and then it just strips off the video, right? Then so you only see audio in Audition. Is that correct?
It does actually give you a video track as well, so you can still see the original video, but you can't edit the video, you can only edit the audio. So what I always do is when it does that, I just delete the video track out of multitrack and I just edit the audio. So
right,
but yeah.
So what I've done, and I think SoundForge Pro will do that too. It'll show the video on top, but then it'll show you the audio is the main thing it will show you. I've even brought video files or movie files into RX6, and then it just shows you the audio. And I've done this with my podcast engineering school classes where, we have 2-hour classes and I'll record the whole thing with video and audio. But since I'm using a local mic for me, I'm recording myself locally on a mic, that's one track, and then I'm recording my system audio in the computer, because I'm actually demoing how to use, Reaper and plugins and, SoundForge Pro and just just audio. I'm recording the system audio as well, and I can actually record them separately. So what I do is I'll bring the audio into those 2 separate tracks into Reaper and then process them and make it sound good. And then I'll mix down the audio and then I'll replace the audio on the video with my mix of the audio. So it's leveled between my mic and the system audio. There's a good level there, and the overall level is at the the LUF standard, which makes sense. Which I just always use the podcasting LUF standards, even if it's for videos. I don't know if that's right, but
just anything on the internet.
Yeah.
So do you aim for -16?
Yeah, -16 stereo or -19 mono. And what I have to be careful of, and this is what I was getting at with you, is that when you record a video and then if you're going to take that audio and work on it and make it sound better, and then after that, marry it back to the video, what you cannot do when you're working on the audio by itself is you can't cut any audio out. Like if there's 5 seconds of noise in the middle, you can't just delete that 5 seconds and then the whole file will be 5 seconds shorter. And then when you line it up to the video, it's going to be 5 seconds shorter, and everything, half the file is going to be shifted forward 5 seconds. And it's going to be out of sync with the picture.
Issues.
So that's the thing.
Yes.
When you're editing audio that you want to marry back to video, you can never delete anything. I mean, you can never delete, I don't know what the right way to say it is. You can never delete any slices of it. You can mute certain slices, or like you said before, you can go into the spectral view and you can use a healing tool, or in RX6, you can replace it, which basically just removes the noise. But the overall length, you can't delete any time frames, so the overall length has to stay the same. That's what I learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
After messing it up.
No, that's true.
So let's get back to your TLM 103. Now, that cannot be the only mic you have, Mike Russell.
Oh, no. I've got a ton of mics. Well, that's a real pun as well, isn't it? I understand. I have a TLM 103, which is now my main mic, and I've only had this, it's very, very new in my studio, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's just amazing. Now I kind of look with envy towards the U87, which the TLM 103 is modeled off of. So it's kind of like, but I think this, is just fantastic. Before this, I was using, I don't know why, I'm kind of bringing it out into my hand now and holding it.
Nice. I hear that.
And this is an Audio-Technica AT4033A, which I was using for a very long time before that. And the reason why I was using that particular model is virtually every radio station I used to work at in their on-air studios had one of those. So I kind of figured, that must be a decent quality microphone. And it served me well. It's been really good, but I'm so pleased to have made the upgrade. And I know certainly when I was asking around a lot of the voiceover forums, people kept on mentioning Neumann. So I've got this, but also for podcasting, I'm a bit of a microphone junkie. I've got two Heil PR40s as well in the studio. And I guess I could do it on a condenser or two condenser mics, or there was one time when Isabella, my business partner and wife, and I were recording a joint podcast for Music Radio Creative, and we were sharing the same condenser mic. I literally had to brush my teeth extra hard on the days we recorded podcasts. But now we got two Heils, and we haven't done it for a while, but when we do a dual podcast, we can use those. And I kind of still like them, even though there's a world of difference between the TLM 103 and the Heil PR40. For podcasting, I think they're brilliant, they're dynamic, and I like the fact that they always say at Heil, don't they, the rear rejection is superb. So I can sit on one corner of the studio, she can be on the other side, and I know that we're going to have hopefully very little problem with bouncing and, crossover and all that kind of stuff that can happen when you have more than one or two or three mics in a room.
Right. That's awesome. So the TLM 103 is a large diaphragm condenser. Is it very sensitive in your opinion? Does it pick up a lot of room noise?
I would say not so much. Surprisingly, not so much. So compared to the AT4033, which I felt you could really hear a lot of stuff, TLM 103 less so. Although saying that, I do know when I plugged this in, I had a mess about with my DBX 286S. And what I did is I played with the dials a little bit, and I kind of turned a lot of stuff down because I found I didn't need so much on the TLM 103. But also at the same time as doing that, I also just kind of really fine-tweaked the gating on the mic as well, so that when I'm not speaking, kind of everything just goes silent. And I think I've got it set at a really nice sweet spot now where I don't notice it, particularly when I'm doing live streams and tutorials. Sometimes I do something CPU intensive and the fan on the iMac kind of whirs up, and whilst you might just slightly hear it while I'm doing some commentary, the moment I stop talking, the fan just completely drops out. So I have been impressed so far.
Nice. All right. So the 286S, which is a very popular channel strip, I don't know, probably 30 or 40% of the guests on this show have the DBX 286S. So what do you, and of course it has a mic pre, it has a compressor, it has gating, it has tone controls. Which sections of the 286S do you use on your TLM 103?
So now I'm going to have to look behind my because I've hidden it away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I'm using the compressor. So I'm adding a bit of compression. It's not got traditional dials, has it? Hang on, let me bring up a picture of the DBX, and then I can sort of commentate along with that.
Okay.
Rather than craning my head
right.
around the side of the iMac.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm using the compressor, and it's got drive and density, and that took a bit of getting used to for me because they're dials that go from 1 to 10,
right?
And I'm used to setting kind of ratios and thresholds. So, but I think so. I use the compressor quite a lot just to kind of, flatten out my voice a little bit. The de-esser is quite good. Again, I've set that to a certain frequency, turn the threshold up a bit, and that works. The enhancer, I was using quite a bit more with the AT4033A, and I think I've rolled that down quite a bit with the TLM103. Enhancer is kind of like basically EQ. It's low frequency and high frequency. And then finally, the expander and gate. That was the thing I was mentioning just a second ago. I kind of reset that up with the TLM103 and hit that sweet spot. So when I go silent, it kind of chops my mic off, but when I say quiet words like f and s, they still get through the gate. So
Okay, that's awesome. So yeah, the TLM 103 just sounds tremendous on your voice. I mean, I can't remember. It was literally in the earlier mid 90s at Soundtrack when we were working on an album, and I think Neumann just came out with a mic. I don't think it wasn't the TLM 103. I think it was a 193 or something. TLM 193. I can't remember what it was, but it was like it probably the same. Maybe it was even the same. Maybe they just changed the body of it because it actually looked like a U87, but it wasn't as expensive as a U87, and we tracked a couple, vocals for a bunch of songs using that. It was pretty good. So it's just what a difference, a good mic makes, as long as you have the room for it. So you have sound treatments in your room there, or is it sort of a live feel kind of room?
Yeah, I do. I've got sound treatment all around, and I kind of thought when we first moved into this new place, which now I've got my kind of studio at home. My dream was to turn one of the rooms into a studio, and that obviously had to get wife approval, and I'm very grateful that it did. But we're not soundproofed, so maybe in the future that will come, and we'll kind of build that room within a room. But the sound treatment enough is fantastic. I mean, I bought some sound foam tiles from a company, I think, on Amazon, and they sent boxes and boxes through. The delivery driver was thrilled to be bringing in these huge crates to our house when we first moved in. And then I went down the DIY store and I bought about 10 cans of glue spray and a mask. And I think the guy on the checkout looked at me like I was some character out of Breaking Bad. Finally, I got back and donned the mask and then kind of, glue sprayed the whole room and was sticking these things up. But yeah, I mean, they make a great difference to the room compared to when I was first in here. I should have recorded some audio before I did all this, but now if I clap, it's just totally dead. There's no echo in here.
Right, yeah, it sounds nice and tight. So that's awesome. All right, let's move on to your mixer. Your USB mixer, I might add. Soundcraft Signiture 12 MTK. Of course, these will be listed in the show notes as well. But I just pulled it up, and it's got quite a number of channels. It's a 12-channel mixer with looks like 8 mic inputs. It retails it's showing here on Sweetwater right now, $449. It's working well for you, Mike?
It's brilliant. It's fantastic. And I'm so glad that I've got this. Again, this was a recent addition to my studio this year. I'd gone without a mixing desk for a long time because I just thought, I don't really need one. I'm not doing too much. It's just like, podcasting, and most of the editing I'm doing is straight inside Adobe Audition in the multi-track there. So why do I need a mixing desk? And I lived without it for a while. I have had mixing desks in the past. I've had Behringer desks. I think it's they call it Xenex or something like that. Xenex, which I kind of never really got round to liking because I thought it was all a bit hissy and weird. Right. And one of the desks I had way back in the distant past was a Soundcraft. In fact, I think it was one of my first sort of mixing desks I had at home, and I always had good memories about how good that was. So, and I was open when I did the search for a new desk. I kind of looked at where did I look at? I looked at a few others. I'm pretty sure I looked at Allen and Heath quite deeply, and they nearly convinced me with their ZI desks. But then I just settled on the Soundcraft Signature 12. I'm very specific in that I need faders. knobs or dials.
Right.
I want to feel like, and the main reason I got this desk, Chris, was for the live streaming, so I could bring in multiple sources and guests and callers, and I could play jingles, and even I could play my door back, and rather than stopping the door as I'm explaining something, I could just fade the music down or the audio down and talk over it. So all of that was important to me. It's got aux sends as well, so I can do mixed minuses and other crazy stuff. And it's just all around really good. I mean, I like this because it's got some kit in there from DBX. It's got British EQ, whatever that is.
Love it.
It makes you sound more British. And but it's really a good bit of kit. I'm specific. I don't like mixing desks that look like, toys. I prefer this one feels like a real mixing desk. I know. I just like. I have not been disappointed with this, and I'm kind of glad about that. But yeah, it does everything I want and more. There's room for expansion. There are faders that I'm not using at the moment, but I know I will do likely in the future, or I'll find a way, or I might be doing something one day that will require that. So yeah, it's just all round brilliant. I would say not necessarily for the starter podcaster. You don't need something like this. A lot of folk would argue you don't really need a mixing desk. But if you're going to be doing live streaming or podcasts with multiple guests or anything like that, or something where you're playing clips and samples all the time, then yeah, I mean, go for it. And obviously the other benefit is two benefits actually. First of all, it's USB 2.0. Not one, as many mixing desks are, which again can cause problems. But also you get all the channels output and all the channels inputted. So you get I think you get 14 inputs and 12 outputs actually physically on your computer. So rather than most mixing desks have the problem where you're essentially just getting the stereo mix of everything,
right,
and you can't control it. You can't say, I just want channel 3 to go here and record. So in Adobe Audition, I can say, just record channel 3 because that's my microphone. That's all I need. So you can do things like that too.
Right. That's actually one of the biggest dangers of buying a USB mixer these days is that if you buy one that's too cheap, it will, even if it has 4 mic inputs, it'll only record stereo in the computer. It'll mix 4 mics down to stereo or mono or whatever, and whatever you choose. And that's just not good if you want to record voices separately. So anyway, just beware when you're buying a mixer.
And even some channels even give you different EQs, and then they give you the output to the computer pre the fader, so you don't even get those nice EQs.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. You think you're fixing up the sound and you got it good, and then later on you listen to the recording and it's flat, and you're like, what? Then you got to do it again. All right, but you're calling it a mixing desk. I just want to point out to the listeners, if you're not familiar with the term mixing desk, it's the same as mixing board or mixing console. It's just another term for it. And I don't know, maybe it's more of a UK term as well. Is that true, Mike?
It is. And I realized this because when I was doing my search, I posted in a Facebook community that was mainly US based. And I said, I'm looking for a mixing desk. Any recommendations? And everyone posted back pictures of workbenches. I was like, whoops.
Yeah. Those desks that, that stand-up desks and stuff.
I was like, great.
That's perfect. Oh, God. All right. So here's the thing I want to ask you about, because you do what I do, which is do something live where you're playing clips and you're fading faders live, like as you're doing it. This is something that a couple sessions ago, I can't even remember. I think it was when I talked to Corey Coates, I think it was last session. I'm getting confused. I was recording the session with the MixPre 6, and so I wasn't using my mixer. So I was just running everything into the MixPre 6, which is sort of like a portable digital recorder, and I was recording it. And then I had the problem where as I started the show, I played my intro music, and normally when I come in and start talking, I manually fade the music down just, a little bit, 3-4 dB, whatever. So I can talk over it while the music is still jamming in the background. But with the MixPre 6, I couldn't, there was no, I didn't know how to do it. So there's something to be said for doing things live and being able to mute people, or even if you cough, you can mute your channel while you cough or something. What is your experience with that because I find it difficult sometimes to not only host a show, but to actually engineer it live and to be pushing faders and muting things and clicking, tapping buttons. Do you find that difficult, or did it take you a while to get used to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole lot easier if you just focus on the show and just do the content.
Right.
But I guess there's still a little bit of radio in me where I feel I need a fader and I need to be writing a fader and all of that kind of stuff. So I guess it feels kind of natural to me. But also, I wonder whether I'm focusing on what I'm saying sometimes when I'm playing like a jingle underneath me, or whether I'm focusing on just being really clever with my fader actions when I'm speaking. So yeah, there is a bit of multitasking involved there, which sometimes can be a little distracting.
Right, and sometimes I mess up a little, but nothing that's not fixable. Although we did a show called Social Media Unscrambled, which was literally live. We actually streamed it on a live internet radio station, and that was great practice because if you're tapping a sound clip and it's not playing, I mean, you got to deal with it live. Like, what do you do? How do you cover it up, and how do you wing it?
Yeah,
that was great practice. All right, you have an iMac, a 27-inch iMac that you said you bought in late 2015. It's interesting. This is is like the computer I was looking at this past week if I was going to buy a Mac, and really powerful Mac. So is your computer like really powerful? Like, did you upgrade all the components, like the RAM and the hard drive and everything, and the processor?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I really kind of beefed it out because I thought, I'm definitely going to need something good, seeing as I'm doing all my live streaming and audio production on here. So it's just upgraded today to Mac OS High Sierra. So hopefully everything is still coming across okay with the new OS. It's a Retina 5K. It's got 4 gigahertz Intel Core i7 processor, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I actually went for the upgraded Fusion drive, which is 3 terabytes.
Oh.
So I keep everything locally. All the orders and bits we work on, all of our sound libraries and stuff, it's all there on that 3 terabyte hard drive. And I think I'm only using half of it right now, so about 1.47 terabytes. So there's still plenty of space.
And what makes the Fusion drive better than SSD?
Well, it's not better.
Oh.
Apple haven't released the AFPS yet, or whatever it is, their new file system. We've had to wait. Oh. Because apparently it's not ready for Fusion Drive.
Oh.
So, yeah. No, crikey, if I could have a 3 terabyte SSD, I would.
Oh, okay. I didn't know the difference between Fusion and SSD. I know SSD is the new thing where it's much faster than the old spinning hard drives.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing. You see, I would... Crikey, yeah. If I could have a 3 terabyte SSD, I would, but I think that would be... I don't know if that they even exist, but I'm sure if they did, they would be really costly.
Okay.
With Fusion drives, I think what they try to do there is they try to mix together, so part of your hard drive is SSD and part of it is the traditional spinning drive. I call it the spinning drive of death because eventually they die. So Isabella has got an iMac with a spinning drive in. She's had it since 2012, I want to say, and it's pretty much died now. So what we've done is we've installed the OS on an external SSD drive, and it's like she's using a new Mac, but she can't really use the internal drive because it's just slowed right down to a halt. So I don't know. This iMac is quite new, so I don't know whether in maybe a few years from now, when the spinning bit of it starts sort of aging, shall we say, will I see a performance degrade? Maybe I will. So
Interesting.
yeah. Hard disks, I don't know.
All right. Well, I went to the Apple store, and we're recording this way in advance of when it's going to be published. So today is September 26th. Yes, it is September 26th. You know how I know? Because Podcast Engineering School starts tonight. The fall batch starts tonight. I'm so psyched for all the students of Podcast Engineering School. And of course, we have the next the next podcast engineering school program is going to start in January, but this might not come out till November. But I went to the Apple store, and apparently they're coming out with an iMac Pro. And it's so confusing the way, I'm not an Apple guy, and when I went to the store, I was like, they got a Mac, they got a Mac Pro, they got a MacBook, they got a MacBook Pro, they got I don't even know. But anyway, it's an iMac Pro, apparently. It's like the one that you have and the one I was looking at, but it's like you can beef it up even more. Apparently the processor is going to have 18 cores.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like, and they're like, no, you didn't misread that. It's actually 18 cores. So anyway, maybe I should wait. And apparently that's coming out in December. That's what they say. I don't know if Apple is good with sticking to their deadlines, but anyway, iMac Pro, apparently you can just build a ridiculous beast of a computer.
Absolutely, yeah. I do think with Apple, a lot of the time you're paying for the name as well as the actual components or the hardware that goes inside those computers. So, but at the moment, I do think they do make the best computers out there for any kind of multimedia production. If I could, though, and all the software was compatible, I would probably build a box myself, running some form of Linux, and I would edit away in there. Maybe if I get my favorite plugins and I find a good Linux DAW, I could kind of do that, and then I'd go for it. I kind of buy everything separately and just put it together myself. But that's a project in itself. And I have to ask myself, do I want to spend 2 or 3 months building a computer or focusing on the business? So.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't know about Linux, but definitely with Windows, like you can do that. You can build from scratch. You can make the best computer ever and all this. But then it's like, well, then you get updates, and it's like the updates can mess things up, and then I don't know. It's just too much. I'm not a computer guy per se, so I'm not like, I'm not one of these guys who can like make these ghost images of the hard drive and revert back if something goes wrong and all. Like, I don't know how to do all that, but apparently people do. But yeah, I think I agree. Well, popular consensus agrees with you that the Macs are much more stable when it comes to audio, and that's why after talking to Corey about doing everything in the box, I was leaning that way. Because I would love to do everything in the box, but then Jason DeFilippo was posting something just recently where he's like, "Oh, my Mac was the problem it had with crashing, I solved it. I just removed this other piece of memory or something." And I'm like, "Really? Do Macs? I didn't think Macs crashed very often, right?"
Not in my experience, but I don't know if you have a dodgy bit of memory or something that's holding it up. Yeah, I mean, I've had nothing but good experiences with Macs. Although saying that, I have just recently converted my phone from iPhone to Android, much to the disgust of all of my family and friends who can no longer send me blue messages. But I'm like, no, I'm going to Android. It's better at the moment.
Well, there's that text messaging app. Ralph M. Rivera actually told me about this. It's called Signal. It's an app for text messaging, and it's like encrypted. So
is this Android?
I think it's both. It's just an app. So but yeah, I have Android, and I have that app on my Android. It's called Signal.
I'm gonna look it up. That's amazing.
Yeah, and anyway, it's like encrypted, so all the people who are listening, they can't listen. And I even asked them, I'm like, yeah, but the NSA must have cracked that one, and he's like, no. He's like, this is the one that Edward Snowden recommends because the NSA can't get into it.
Wow.
I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think, and I just bought this other thing called private internet access that Ralph M. Rivera told me about as well, which is like when you go to, and you can have it on your phone or your computers. It's like when you go to a public Wi-Fi that's not secure, you can run this private internet access, and it creates like this VPN tunnel. So it secures your connection, so no one can no one can know anything about what you're doing and sending over the internet.
That's right, because you can be sitting in a coffee shop and someone can be on the same Wi-Fi and get into your phone or your computer and like access Facebook as you.
Exactly, and then post funny pictures of Ralph Rivera. Yeah, So let's talk about plugins real quick. So you use Adobe Audition to do your production, And I'm assuming let's get into that in a second, but about just plugins, do you have any third-party plugins, or do you have just use the native EQ and compression plugins and things like that?
Yeah, I do. I use third-party plugins. I mean, for the longest time, I have stuck mainly to just using the stock stuff inside Adobe Audition because I think it's very, very good. But recently I went on a bit of a plugin binge. So I've been a long-standing fan of the stuff that iZotope put out there. So much so because of the fact that even Adobe Audition has integrated some of their plugins to be native effects, like the multiband compressor, and some of their stretching stuff is sort of now native inside Audition. But yeah, two plugins I use all the time from iZotope. iZotope Neutron for mixing, EQing, compressing, mastering, and also iZotope Vocal Synth, which kind of creates all kinds of crazy sound effects on your voice. You can vocode it, you can electro it, you can do all these cool things. So I use those two mainly from iZotope. I'm also a fan of MeldaProductions. They have a bundle called MFreeFX, and they're better, in my opinion, than some of the plugins you can buy for money. There's the one that I'm using all the time is the Ring Modulator. So, I mean, if you want to just do funky sound effects if you're producing intros or things like that, or if you want to sound like a Dalek, then the Ring Mod is pretty good. And I've just recently, I used to use them quite a lot when I was at radio stations because they had them, but I've never owned, apart from one or two here and there, Waves audio plugins. But now just recently, a few months back, they had a massive sale, and their platinum package, which I think is pretty much contains all of their plugins apart from the specialist ones like the Abbey Roads and the specially created plugins. So you get pretty much all of the native stock Waves audio plugins platinum. I think they were on sale for $199. You get like 50 of their plugins. And so I purchased that when it went on sale, and I've not been disappointed. I'm now just a complete Waves fan, and I'm using, what am I using? I'm using Flanger a lot when I'm doing kind of imaging style things where things need to go left to right and kind of stereo and all of that. I use the L3 Ultra Maximizer for a bit of real harsh compression on imaging voices. And just to explain imaging for those of your listeners who are saying, what does he mean imaging? Yes. Radio imaging. So radio imaging is essentially where you take a voice and you mix it with sound effects and kind of produce all those tight little sweepers and jingles you hear on radio stations. That's kind of what I associate with imaging. So the L3 is good for that. What else am I using? One of my favorite plugins actually from Waves in that Platinum bundle is Waves Tune Lite. It's just an auto-tune plugin, but I love how easy it is to even use it on voices. And that's how you do all those kind of Obama and Donald Trump singing videos. You kind of you take their voice and then you just kind of select the notes in there and drag it up and put it on extreme auto-tune, and you get a president or a political figure singing a tune, which is quite fun.
That's awesome. So, wow, that's a lot of plugins you just reeled off. I love it. So mainly what you're doing with a lot of these plugins is creating almost sound effects out of voices and music, and that's for use when you're creating, the podcast intros and the radio jingles and commercials. So this is something that most I think no podcasters would do it, but some podcast producers might do this kind of thing and just bring up these different effects and stuff. We've talked about some effects on this show before, but yeah, again, with podcasting, there's not, unless you're making something crazy, you don't need any effects. Maybe just some EQ and compression and limiting and de-essing and gating and stuff like that. So just tell me about how you make these crazy sounding podcast intros. I mean, you just take someone's voice and what do? You just smash it with a compressor and use doublers and these imagers and you just go crazy?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the podcaster is looking for, who's hosting the show. So we work with a wide range of podcasters in all kinds of different niches or niches that are covering all kinds of different topics. And some of them require very simple but well-produced intros. So it's a case of putting a little light compression, some EQ, some gate, little bit of light reverb sometimes, but sometimes even that's a bit too much, and just making it neat and tidy and to fit nicely with the beat and everything, so it just flows and all of that. And I use the Adobe Audition Remix tool, which is a relatively new feature. Really cool magic. So you can put in a piece of music and say that music is 3 minutes in duration. That's a 3-minute instrumental. And the podcaster says, I would like my intro to be 45 seconds. So the first 30 seconds is a voice, and then I want 15 seconds of tail music. With Adobe Audition Remix, you can just basically click and drag to 45 seconds, and it will use a computer algorithm to calculate the cuts. It will make cuts for you, and this is something that saved me. So I still like editing music myself, but this is something that saves so much time. It's kind of like time stretching, but it's not time stretching. It's actually making the cuts for you. So that's the kind of stuff I do. And yeah, occasionally, not very often in the podcast space, because it's kind of more of a natural sound it seems to be the way in podcasting, but occasionally we will produce something really crazy, with doublers, chorus, flanger, phaser, a bit of ring modulation occasionally, stuff like that. But we tend to do more of those effects for radio, and we tend to go into overdrive when we work with DJs on DJ intros. They absolutely love the kind of doubled up, pitch shifted, this is, the biggest DJ live. But obviously we work with a lot of DJ podcasters as well, so it's kind of, there's a mix of everything. There's never a dull day.
So Mike, how would you create like the voice of God effect? Like if you were to take my voice, like if I was to say, everyone on earth should listen to the Podcast Engineering Show. Like if you were to clip that out and make me sound like the voice of God, how would you do it? What effects would you add?
The first thing I'd do is, everyone on earth should listen to the Podcast Engineering Show.
Cool.
And then I might pitch it down a little bit. That's probably where I would start.
Oh, okay. Right, yeah, I guess you wouldn't want to do much with stereo imaging if it's just a single voice of God.
Yeah. And I'm kind of, when you say voice of God, I'm kind of thinking Howard Stern. Didn't he do something like that when he first started out, or on Private Parts?
Yeah, I think he's done a lot of he's done that over time. He's had conversations with God on his show, yes.
Yes.
All right, so now the tuning that you do, let's talk about tuning for a second. Pitching someone up or pitching someone down. I guess it just depends on what effect you're going for, right?
Yeah, totally. So with pitching, I would generally use that. Either I would double or triple up a voiceover, and I would slightly pitch down. Well, it depends what I'm going for. So if I'm going for a DJ intro, I would take that voice saying this is DJ X in the mix, and then I would move that onto 3 separate tracks, and one track I would pitch down maybe 1 semitone, and then the next track I would pitch down 2 semitones, and then I might move one track slightly to the left and one track slightly to the right, and then you get that very deep kind of this is DJ X like in stereo. If I wanted a robot sound, I'd probably I'd make 2 tracks, and I'd pitch up 5 semitones and down 5 semitones, and you get the kind of I am a robot. Obviously, I can't. It doesn't come across well if I just try and demo it now. But if you do that inside a DAW, it sounds great. And then another thing I occasionally do a lot of is I do pitch automation. So I'll do a stutter, like counting down the best songs, and I would take the like that, and then I would draw an automation from say really maybe 15 semitones plus, right the way down to 0, and it's counting down like that. So that's
cool.
just a few of the ways I use pitch.
That's awesome. And what is the you talked about the Melba Productions, the MFreeFXBundle, the ring modulator. What does that ring modulator do?
So a ring modulator, from what I understand, it uses some kind of it kind of mixes a voice or the input with a tone, like a tone that I guess a traditional oscillator would make. So, those beeps, those test tones.
Right.
And then you can kind of change the shape of the tone. So you can say, I want a sine, or I want sawtooth, or I want a square tone. And then you can change the frequency as well. So you can have a really high whistling tone or a low tone. And then it kind of adds... It's really hard to describe in words without actually playing an example. Right. But it kind of adds... a slightly robotic effect, kind of like when you hear the Daleks in Doctor Who saying exterminate, exterminate, and that you hear the wobbly sound underneath. That's kind of ring modulation, but that's obviously a certain style of it. You can take it right up, and you can have high frequencies, and you can have kind of it kind of adds some kind of electronic gliss sound to the voice that I find particularly pleasant in produced pieces.
Nice. Yeah, have you ever heard of The Adventures of Finn Caspian? It's a podcast that Jonathan Messenger produces with his son, actually. Well, his son's part of the show, actually, because it's a podcast for kids. He does a lot of robot voices, and he was previously on the show, and he talked about he uses a couple plugins. He probably uses additional plugins now, but anyway, he made a lot of robot voices in his show. There's like literally a bunch of the main characters are robots. So he had to make a lot of different voices, and each robot has their own like signature sound, right? So it's pretty cool.
That's so cool. And that's one of the things I really like. That's why I love what I do, because I love playing with plugins and with different whatever I can get my hand on, trying to change the sound of a voice. I guess that's what I've wanted to do since I was 8 years old, is just, pressing record and play on the cassette tape and then playing it back, but just pulling off the play button a little bit so it slows down a little bit, and then rewinding it. And it's fascinated me. So,
hey, do you ever do like any sort of like in any of the intros or the radio spots, is it ever like a movie trailer where like you get those like thuds that's like boom, it's like really sub frequencies that like literally shake the house? You ever do that?
Yeah, we've done production like that. Not particularly for podcasting, although I think with the drop of iOS 11 now and the invention by Apple of podcast trailers, there will be the possibility maybe to produce more of those style of trailers. I mean, DJs like that kind of stuff a lot, where things stop and go silent, and then suddenly a big sonic thud comes in, and then something else happens. So yeah, it's definitely a style of production that I've done from time to time. It's not something that comes up regularly in my day-to-day, though.
Mm. Yeah, I have an old set of speakers that they're like bookshelf speakers, but it also has a subwoofer, like a separate speaker that's just a big subwoofer. And it's so old that like through moving and, moving from apartment to apartment and then moving from New Jersey to Colorado Springs, it's gotten jumbled around so much that like part of the speaker must be broken, because every time we're watching a movie and you hear that really low frequency, like boom, like this speaker rattles. Like it doesn't, it just can't handle the low frequencies because it's like half broken. So it's like, brrr. And I explained it to my wife one time. I'm like, you hear that thing rattling? She's like, yeah. I'm like, it's not supposed to do that, right? She's like, oh no, I thought that was part of the sound.
Nice.
But anyway, so I need a new subwoofer, I guess.
Well, go for the Sonos. The Sonos subwoofer is pretty awesome.
I haven't looked into any of that. I'm waiting, because our TV's a little bit small for the room, so I'm waiting until the 4K TVs get a little cheaper, and then I'm going to buy like a nice TV, and then I'll buy a nice set of speakers with a sub and everything.
Definitely. Reason I like the Sonos sub is because it looks like a surprised emoticon with a hole in the middle, and you can actually put your hand right through the center, and when the bass whacks, your hand kind of wobbles. It's amazing.
Really? Oh, I got to try that. That's something you can try. You just reminded me of another thing. You can, I don't know why I'm telling this on this show, but you can take one bucket of water and make it hot water, one bucket of water, make it cold water, and then stick 1 foot in each bucket. And apparently it does something weird with the right and left hemispheres of your brain and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because like
that's so cool.
It just confuses your body. It's like, is this hot or warm? Like each like the hot one might feel cold or something, or I don't know. I got to try that. We should video that.
That sounds interesting.
Barry, would you try that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Of course he would. All right. So about your production for, the radio jingles and the podcast intros and stuff like that, what else, because we're kind of circling the field here, getting ready for a landing, but what other type of production is involved in that audio? Of course, you can make sound funny, but as far as leveling, do you deliver your final product at a certain level?
So really, it depends what the client's looking for. But generally, we tend to mix down and master things. I guess finally, the final process we'd put on audio before sending it out is maybe a tiny bit of hard limiting, and maybe send it at -3 dB.
Okay. And then do you use like a multi-band compressor on the whole mix to get it to be thicker? Or because I know one thing, well, in podcasting specifically, most shows are not compressed very much, so like the dynamic range is way too much. So like when someone's loud, it like hurts your ears, and when someone is soft, you literally can't hear them. Do you do any like mastering step for the intros and the jingles besides limiting?
But yeah, I mean, again, it's a tough one, I think, deciding how much to put on. So I'm always conscious, particularly, depending on where it's going out. So if it's a podcast, then I might be tempted to compress it a little bit more, so it's kind of nice and it's got a nice feel and it doesn't kind of peek around on the podcast. But if it's going out on a radio station, for instance, one of the issues I always had producing spots and jingles for radio is that if you put too much compression on, it then goes through an Optimod FM compressor and kind of that whacks it more, and then you get that kind of kind of pumping sound. So I'm always a little bit scared of putting too much compression on. Yeah, right. That's for radio. Yeah, you got to be aware of that, because that's like when a song. I always think of when songs come on, like the heaviest part of a song is one level, and then when they get real quiet, like it just becomes so much louder. Yeah,
and then when they crash in again and start being loud and heavy, the volumes, perceptually goes down, and it's backwards, but it's because of that radio limiting. I want to ask you about your site, because musicradiocreative.com, you have a button right on top. It says Create Audio, and it says Open Audio Creator. So what happens when people click that button?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when you go to that site and push the button, it will take you essentially, first of all, to a place where you can choose a voice. Now, that could be one of two things. That could be a spoken voiceover artist, or it could be one of our singers. We work with, I think, over now 100 different talents from around the world. So we've got voiceovers, obviously, in North American English, we've got British English, we've got Australian, Irish, and we've got different languages, Spanish, French, I believe we've got Russian, and just everything. I mean, nice. Isabella looks after the talent recruitment side of things, so she knows more about that than I, but we have a lot of different talent on there. Singers, again, from different parts of the world, so you can choose, first and foremost, do you want it sung? Do you want it spoken? Then it will take you to the next step where you can start typing in your script. So instantly there you can start designing how you'd like your intro or your jingle or whatever it is. It's just whatever it is that's audio, you're designing right there on the site. Then you go on to the next step and you can choose, do I want sound effects with this? Do I want vocal effects? All that crazy stuff we talked about earlier, Chris, the ring modulation and the chorus and the flanger. You can tick that as an option. You can choose music that you might want as well. Particularly when we're working with podcasters, we tend to be very specific with them as to what kind of music they would like, because I know that when you're building a podcast, you want your intro to absolutely rock, so having a choice there or an input on the music is very important. And then finally, once you've kind of melded that all together, it calculates and gives you a price right there and then on the site, and you can click to the next page and check out and have your audio in any time between 1 to 3 days. Usually the faster side of things is what we aim for. And that's how it works. It's great. I love it.
Oh man, that is so cool. I'm trying to, I don't know, like obviously being an audio engineer, I can put, things in a DAW and put on effects and everything, but what you do is an art. It's not like if you hand me a multi-track tape or a multi-track hard drive of a song and give me, a 72 channel mixing board and have me mix it with a bunch of outboard gear, I'm like, boom, I can start doing it. That's what I used to do. But for what you do, it's just, I don't know, there's something about it. It's an art, and it's not like any audio engineer can just step in and make stuff like that. It's just, I mean, I could, but it would take me like 5 weeks. And then I still wouldn't know exactly what to do, and it wouldn't come out just right. So I really think what you do is an art, and obviously that's why you're in business doing it, because people appreciate that. So
I appreciate that, Chris, and it's a passion as well. It's something I've loved since I got into it when I listened to radio as a kid and heard all those jingles, and I was like, I want to be doing that.
Do you listen to like the old, like from the 1930s era of like radio drama?
Oh wow, no, but I love all the kind of sung jingles and the Sonovox and the Pams and the jam style jingles from the 60s.
Yeah, because I think before TV, like in the 30s and 40s and stuff, or maybe even earlier. No, it was definitely earlier. They would do radio, but it would be like a modern day TV show, but it would just be on the radio. And they'd have all the different characters in the studio. They'd have someone doing Foley live, making the noises. Like a door opens, they'd actually open a door, and then the people would have conversations, and they would literally, it was like a TV sitcom, but just on radio.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
I know. Anyway.
Kind of like audio drama.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like that.
Wow.
And I'm sure they still do it these days, but these days you would just also do it on video, because that's a more widespread and popular medium than audio only.
And then next it's going to be virtual reality, and you have to create all that audio, that spatial audio that goes around the head.
Yes. I started looking into that like maybe 3-4 months ago about all that stuff.
Wow.
They make microphones. They make like a single mic that has like, well, it's a single, it's almost like a handheld mic, but it has like 6 different microphones in it, and it actually records 6 different channels, and you tell it what orientation it is, and then that's how they're going to do virtual reality sound, like sound from all around you. It's so cool.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Facebook's getting into it right now with their 360 audio editor, and there's I just recently got the Google Daydream headset, and they have an app on there called Audio Factory, and you go in there and you go in and you plug in cables. Like with VR, you're literally plugging cables into this giant mixing desk, and it's playing audio all around your head. I mean, I want to be in that. I want to be doing that. So it's exciting me. Maybe that's the next thing to look forward to for us audio fans.
I love that. I'm so into the VR, and I just don't know what to do. I mean, I can research it and everything, but I don't know what can be done. But anyway, that's definitely where a lot of us will be having fun in the future. So Mike Russell, musicradiocreative.com. This has been just awesome, you being on the show. So thank you so much for coming on, man.
Chris, it's been a pleasure, and all the best to Barry as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of overdoing that one clip today. What other clip can I play? Barry, you want to talk about some history? Yeah? Okay. All right. Let's talk history.
All right. First, the Inkers.
All right. Well, Mike Russell also has a YouTube channel. Visit that channel. Seriously, there's so much on Mike's channel. It's just amazing. And I still can't believe that Facebook Live only does mono audio. That's I'm having trouble with that, Mike.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I didn't realize that. Wow. All right. Well, look, another awesome session of the Podcast Engineering Show. Mike Russell has shared so much. It's crazy. Thanks again, Mike. Thank you for listening, and check out all our previous sessions on the podcast. The website is podcastengineeringschool.com, and check out our courses and everything too. Podcastengineeringschool.com. And Mike, you have to yell out "sound great" at the end here, okay? Mike,
sound great.
Sound great. Oh.
Walk away from me well, and you can play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well, it's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let them float and drift in time now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. You react some everything. You change your attitude well. You say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. You gave up on me well, so change your game and give away. You say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now, it's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie, I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. I want you to know you were ever with me through. I gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold that meaning. Does it mean it's still the same? You're pushing me away. The work your theories now where you're getting worked up on your now. The work your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me.